Hello, everyone. So, because I did not go over the next step in the project, I decided to do a video recording of part five. You already know that this upcoming Saturday is the presentation preview where you will be presenting for myself, your mentors, Jasmine and Lexi, as well as for Irondale, the Irondale teaching artist, rather. And this is to get feedback from all of us, not only about your slides themselves, but also your presentation skills. Presentations, they take practice, right? So I want you all to be able to have a practice run. So if you see that there's any bugs, if there's anything that needs to be edited, things you may not have thought about previously, but now have to think about because you had the rehearsal, this is the time to do it so that when we do have your final presentations the following week, you will be able to hopefully give the presentation without any issues, especially for those of you who are doing group projects. Now, what you're doing, like I said, is you are putting parts 1 through 4 essentially onto slides. They can be Google Slides, they can be PowerPoint, they can be Prezi. I'm sure there's other programs that are out there. If there's any that you're comfortable with, but you have a question about it, just email me, ask me if you're able to use that program. I'm sure it's fine. The assignment itself, it's of course to create your presentation where you're sharing your research on your chosen waterway. And of course, it has to be well researched, it has to be clear, and gets your audience interested in the topic. So, what do I mean by that? I basically mean that you need to make your slides not only look presentable, so of course, reduce spelling errors as much as possible, be careful about punctuation, um, and not using too many words on your slides. That's always a big issue, especially with high school students. Sometimes myself too, but usually with high school students. Uh, as well as using pictures. So I will share a couple of links that you can go to gain pictures and use them, be able to use them freely, sometimes even without having to include the source information. But that's a separate post. So what do I want? So here I have a breakdown of each section of your presentation. So of course, first part is the title. You want your title, and then under that, your group members or just your name if you're working by yourself. Of course, this should be one slide. When you're creating a title, you just want to summarize what your research topic is. Keep it simple. So I gave an example such as if your research is on the relationship between combined sewer overflows or CSOs and dissolved oxygen concentration in the Hudson River, then a potential title would be has the production has the reduction in combined sewer overflow in the Hudson River affected the dissolved oxygen concentration from 1980 to 2018. It's a long title, but that's fine. It's a research project. Titles tend to be fairly long, especially you may have seen this if you've looked for research papers. Now, the next slide should have your research question and or hypothesis. You don't have to use these names. If you have another name you want to use, that's fine. You could say research topic, for example. But what I have here is I have this divided into two sections. The slide content, so what should actually be on your slide, and what you're actually sharing with the audience. And you'll notice it's two separate things, and I did this on purpose. Slide content, of course, your research question and or your hypothesis. This is probably one of the few times, one if not the only time, I should see and anyone should see a complete sentence, right? Or a complete statement. Everything else should be phrases, parts of speech that if you were to put a period at the end, it would not make sense because it's just a phrase. So this is what you would have on your actual slide itself. what you would share with the audience, all of us, is of course what your research question is or your hypothesis. Some of you have done both. Yes, you add both to your slides. If you have only done one or the other, that is fine too. Just put either the research question or the hypothesis. So for what you share with the audience, like I said, research question, hypothesis, and then you share why you chose this question or made this statement or both, right? So we want to know what is your personal connection to this research question, what made you interested in asking it. So the background information, that was your part one, I believe. I may be wrong about that, it's been a while. So it's the part where you had to do research on your chosen waterway. So this should only take up 2 slides. This is still a science presentation. So this is not a historical presentation, does not have to be super long. However, you do need to give a summary of your waterway's history. And this is the slide content itself. You choose your main points, like I shared before, in your written essay. What are the main topics? That's what you put on your slide. And then when you talk about it, those main points will hopefully trigger memories of, what was actually shared in your research paper. Just a couple of notes, or one note I do want to emphasize, and I'll probably emphasize this throughout the rest of this video: only phrases are allowed to be used. Reason being is that in general, whether you are doing an online presentation, which is what you'll be doing this Saturday and next Saturday, as well as if you're doing a presentation in person, if you have too many words on your slides, it's distracting for the audience. There's too much going on. So what happens is the audience will read the slide and not listen to you, even if you're reading the slide. The other side of it is that if you have too many words on your slides, you'll start reading it because you're nervous. And what you want to do is speak as if you are having a conversation with the audience rather than reading to the audience. It's very different. So what do you share with your audience? Like I said, it's a summarized version of your essay, and also how the history of your waterway connects to your research question. And I give this example, which extends when I shared this previous example in the title section, for the relationship between CSOs and the Hudson River and dissolved oxygen. Then that means you should share just a brief, very maybe 1 or 2 sentences, brief summary or history of, let's say, the New York City combined sewer system and how that impacted the water quality, which then impacted the amount of dissolved oxygen because of all of the nutrients entering that waterway during a rainstorm. And then all of the way, or a couple of the ways that that is being reduced. And I give an example, of course, like green infrastructure. That's just an example, just to kind of get you thinking. The next, this is probably going to be the bulk of your presentation or take up the most time, both in terms of editing it as well as sharing it with the audience. So data analysis and your results. These are, for the most part, the same thing. These should be up to 5 slides. They can be less. I would rather not go more than that just because we do have a time limit, but it should be up to 5 slides. I will say if it's only 1, you don't have enough information. You need probably at least 2. So slide content. Of course, tables, graphs, if you have edited your tables and graphs since you've submitted it to me last week, or this week, days are running together, last week, then that is fine. That's kind of the point, right? Each time I've shared that they don't have to be 100% complete. And it's the same thing with this one. But When you do finally turn in your presentation, which is going to be the last weekend of class, so the following week, you present it to your audience, you do need to make sure you have your labels on your XY axis. Of course, you need a title. If you included a legend, especially if you have multiple parameters being graphed on one graph, or you have multiple sites graphed on one graph, then yes, you need a legend. Make sure that's included, and make sure that it, if you're going to put it, for example, under the title, make sure the title and the legend are completely aligned. So if they're going to both be in, if they're going to be in the center, have them both be in the center. If they're going to be on the left side, have them both be on the left side. Otherwise, it doesn't look professional. So for those of you who are going to have a trend line added to your graph, fantastic. Make sure you include the equation. You do have options of where you put that equation. You can either put it in the legend, you can also have it right next to the trend line itself. So it just depends on how it looks. The main goal is to make sure that it's easy for the audience to find. Doesn't matter if you can find it. You put together the presentation. It's the audience that has to find it. Next, and some of this feedback too is based on some of the graphs and tables that I've looked at already. So make sure that you have enough significant figures. Now you all either have or are doing chemistry. Just for anyone who hasn't had it, significant figures just means the level of accuracy for your measurements. So let's say you have a measurement of 1.1. There's a certain procedure you have to go through if you have multiple measurements. Like let's say you have for dissolved oxygen, let's say it's very low. You have for 1.1, another is 1.3, another one's 1.57, another is 1.6. What you want to do is, let's say you're taking the average, add them all up, divide them by, I believe that was 3 or 4 entries or data entries. Boom, you have your average. But the least amount of significant figures or least amount of numbers is 2. It's the first number as well as whatever numbers are after the decimal point. Basically, make sure it all looks the same. There are a couple of you who created tables and graphs that don't have any decimal points. There you've lost too much accuracy, or you've lost too much precision. So you need to at least have 1 digit after the decimal point. In other words, 2 significant figures. Okay, so what to share with your audience? This is where you share how you analyzed your data. So this is why I emphasize both during the cleaning as well as the analyzing. Make sure you make notes of what you did and why you did it, because then it makes it easier to share that because you have to share it. So you have to describe your tables, your graphs. When you're describing your table is not something you use to show a pattern, because your audience is not going to see it. That's why you have the graph. You show the table to then say, this information is what's then graphed. This information is what's actually graphed, right? So you're basically proving that you didn't pull data out of some place that you shouldn't have.